With the exception of parents, it's educators who have witnessed firsthand the ravages of this COVID-19 pandemic with its spotlight on racial and economic injustice, which have so devastated and touched in cruel ways the lives of the young people in our classrooms. You've had front row seats to a show that no one wanted to watch, and it's because you love young people. You've lost young people. You've watched young people lose their family members. You've watched them get sick. You've watched them struggle with isolation, eating disorders and disordered eating, cutting and other self-harming and self-destructive behaviors, food and housing insecurity and injustice. You've seen it all, and you've seen it all up close. And except for you, many, many more young people probably wouldn't have made it this far. And for that, I want to say thank you. It's possible you're hearing these words of gratitude and you're thinking of all the things that didn't go well or didn't go well enough or didn't go at all. Or you're thinking of all the mistakes that you made in this last year or 18 months, or maybe regrets from this past year or last 18 months. I hope that you will remember, in spite of all of the voices that might be telling you otherwise, that you have done amazing work, that you've lived into your passion for education and young people in the midst of a once-in-a-century pandemic. There was no manual, there was no guide, there was no playbook. You were building that plane while you were flying it and caring for the passengers in the plane all at the same time. And of course, you made mistakes. How could you not have? Of course, you struggled. How could you not? There may have been days when you just wanted to walk away from teaching. Maybe there were many more of these days than you're even ready to admit to yourself. There may have been days when you couldn't tell anything you did made a difference. And probably many days you weren't sure how you'd make it through. I would love to share this quote from one of my dear teachers and mentors, a man named Harvey Jackins. He said and wrote, "Every single human being at every moment of the past, if the entire situation is taken into account, has always done the very best they could do, and so deserves neither blame nor reproach from anyone, including self. This in particular is true of you." I hope that you will let these words sink into your bones, to let yourself consider that you have all done, each of you, done the very best that you could do. And that this is true of not only you, but also of your colleagues, of your students, of your parents, of your administrators. You've done the best you could, given the resources that you had and the many you did not. You've done the best you could, given the impacts of oppression on your personal lives and on the lives of your students. Even when you've made mistakes, even on your worst days in the classroom, on Zoom or in person, even when you've made decisions or taken actions that you regret now and wish you could take back, you are still good. You might try saying the words, wherever you're watching this from, to yourself, that all educators are completely good. Perhaps in a more quiet space, maybe you would even consider saying, I am completely good. Frankly, what you have figured out both individually and collectively as a community of educators is nothing short of miraculous. It's been that hard. These may have been the hardest 18 months of your personal life and in your work with young people. And that doesn't take anything away from how good you are. And so I ask you to consider being completely pleased with yourself. In fact, I'm going to think out with you, think out loud that maybe being pleased with ourselves is necessary in this moment and might even be the only correct perspective to hold. I understand the pull to notice the ones that you couldn't reach, that we didn't reach, or the ways that the systems fell short, deeply short, from what our young people deserved and what we deserved. And it did, and we did, and we need to change that system, and still we can be pleased. Coming from a place of deficit and disappointment only leaves us more discouraged and deflated, or it will have us coming from our work from a place of urgency or looking for redemption. And these approaches really aren't workable if we're hoping to create a more just world for all. You are a group of people who have decided to be allies to young people and to transform this system to be more just. You're a community of adults in solidarity with young people. I want to share one of my favorite definitions of solidarity from another one of my mentors, Angela Davis. She writes, I think that bringing people together in movements, creating solidarity, means representing ourselves primarily as individuals. Sorry, not primarily as individuals, but as members of communities of struggle. So let's consider that just for a moment. What would it mean, first and foremost, to see yourselves as members of the same community of struggle? The struggle that you're facing is real. The entire community, you, your colleagues, your students, parents, we're all exhausted. And it's not only understandable, it's predictable. This isn't about not being personally resilient enough. This isn't even about resilience. And it's certainly institutional. We're talking about oppression, something that is systematic and that without healing ends up becoming internalized. Humans are beings that feel. We feel feelings, and oppression hurts people, and hurt is a feeling. When we don't have sanctioned spaces and supported practices for this emotional healing that we all need to do, the feelings of being targeted by oppression don't have a healthy place to go. And then we get further targeted for showing our feelings or even just having our feelings. And that also is oppression. So where and how do these internalized feelings of oppression show up? Primarily, they'll go in three places. The first one is it's going to turn against ourselves. And probably nothing I'm going to share here is new to you. We know in this last period, we've been witnessing higher rates of alcohol, marijuana, and other drug use and abuse and addiction. We've seen higher rates of isolation, even beyond what was imposed by the pandemic. We've seen higher rates of disordered relationships with food. We've seen increased rates of screen time and other sedentary behaviors. We've seen overwork and/or a disconnection from work altogether. And we've seen a lack of and disordered sleeping as well. These are not anyone's individual shortcomings. These are the impacts of a global pandemic overlaid with and exploiting racism, sexism, extraction, and many other oppressions. Your feelings of frustration, exhaustion, hopelessness, helplessness, fear, and anger are real feelings. And with nowhere to go, they'll go towards ourselves in these painfully predictable ways. And none of this is a surprise. Internalized oppression against the South happens when we don't have sanctioned spaces to heal the pain of oppression. The other place that these feelings are going to go are against members of our own group. We're going to see the places where this internalized oppression is impacting our relationship with those that are closest to us, often closest to us. We see in the organizations we're working with higher rates of public attacks, of criticism, gossip, greater mistrust and skepticism and cynicism, a canceling of our connections and relationships, in addition to sabotaging and undermining. These unhealed feelings are fraying our connection and our alliances with each other. It's harder for us to work together to transform our systems and end oppression when we turn this hurt on each other. This form of internalized oppression impacts how we work with each other, even or maybe especially in our communities where we're working towards the very same vision, the very same goals, the very same outcomes. The third and predictable place where these internalized feelings are going to go are towards young people. And this is They'll go towards people who have less power than us. And in the classroom, that's going to be the young people we teach our students. And this is the oppression of adultism. Simply put, adultism is the systematic and institutionalized mistreatment of young people. And it's based in the misinformation and the lie that somehow young people are not human or not yet fully human. I want to be very clear, this is not about being a good and well-intentioned adult, and certainly not about so-called good and bad educators or so-called good and bad parents or good and bad teachers. This is about a systemic and systematized oppression, which we call adultism. What can it look like? It can look like many things. It can certainly show up as telling young people they need to grow up, or not believing them when they are telling the truth for them, and even maybe the truth for us. It's expecting young people to act like adults, sit still, be serious. It's telling them how to spend their time, or what is worth their time, what's important for them to be spending their time on. It could mean and look like minimizing young people's dreams or ideas as naive or unattainable or wishful thinking. And it certainly can also mean not giving young people accurate information to allow them to make decisions about things that affect their lives. I still remember the first time my mentor, Lillian Roybal Rose, shared with me why she started leading these workshops on adultism with her fellow educators. She recounted the story of walking into a teacher's lounge and overhearing two teachers talking about a shared student. And with dismay and with heartbreak, she could have sworn that these teachers hated their students. She was heartbroken and also acknowledging sometimes it feels that way. It does feel like you might hate your students, but I want to offer to you that what we're really hating collectively and individually is we're hating the system of oppressions that have set us up to act out these feelings of internalized oppression towards young people. The only people around you who will bear the brunt of these feelings are the very people that you have dedicated your lives to, who you're committed to, and who you love. And without these sanctioned spaces to heal, we will turn these feelings towards young people. It's predictable. And Lillian knew that. That's partly why she started this work 4 or 5 decades ago, and why I've continued to do this work. Those unhealed feelings become adultism in spite of who we are and in spite of what we want. In this time of greater isolation, we've often turned more inwards. Every single educated has committed to be an ally to young people, and your care for young people and their education is what connects you as a community. And yet in our hurt and in the fear of this time of pandemic, many of us have chosen not if given all the choices, but it has felt limited, our choices. And going it alone looked better than the other options, and I get it. In the time of COVID, we were both more on our own, and it was where we had control over. It's the thing that we could try to make right in a world that felt like it was collapsing around us. But we need each other. We need each other to heal. We need each other to have the just world that you imagine. And I look at young people, and I want you to consider doing the same. Look at how fiercely young people fight for and hold on to their connection with each other in spite of the hurt. Look at how bravely they can forgive, and how wisely they don't hold on to righteousness or grudges if it means sacrificing the connection in relationship. They are leading us. They are leading us. They are showing us what is true, what is real, and what matters. Each of you matters, and your relationships with each other are precious. We cannot end oppression on our own without each other. We can't heal from the effects of oppression on our own without each other. What I have witnessed in my last 27 years as a racial justice, both student and educator, is that when we're given the opportunity to heal in community, we organize, we come together in solidarity, and we work for change. We are no longer able to see our struggle as a personal weakness or as an individual failing. We no longer agree to have our internalized oppression pathologized or criminalized. We can see that there is a bigger system at play. We can come together in solidarity to transform the system from a place of healing rather than turning blame towards each other or the effects of oppression against ourselves. If we can remember that each of us is good and that we can completely heal from the effects of oppression, I believe these are the baselines from which we can do this work together in solidarity. Prioritizing our emotional healing is necessary to be in integrity with young people as their allies. Everything our students are going through and have gone through in this last year, we're also going through. We do our own healing work because it moves our liberation forward. To do it, we first have to figure out why and how this is for us. Otherwise, it sets us up to reinforce these power imbalances and recreate savior narratives. Our students need us alongside us as their allies, not as their saviors. Remember Angela Davis's quote, "We need to see ourselves as members of the same communities of struggle to be in solidarity." Being an ally in solidarity in this work will mean different things for each of us based on both our individual and collective histories, backgrounds, and current situations. One thing that would be true, and one thing that ties us together in this community, is that we are adults who have decided to be adult allies to our young people. So in closing, there are 3 things I will offer to you as pathways to solidarity. These directions, I believe, are both in our best interest and will also support us to be in integrity as we decide to be in solidarity with young people. One is that we could identify and acknowledge the role that adultism is playing in our relationships and in the systems of oppression with which we are working and living under. We could commit to work on where we are targeted by adultism as young people, because we ourselves were targeted first, and many of us did not heal from those experiences when we were young. We could create more spaces with integrity and intention for young people to do their own healing work as an invitation, not as a requirement, and certainly not under our direction. We need to do our own healing work alongside, or even maybe a little in advance, sometimes just 30 seconds in advance, to really support young people in doing their own work, their own healing. Doing our own healing helps us to back the leadership of young people and to support them to take charge of ending adultism, to do their own healing and to recognize its impact on their lives. We will need to follow young people's leadership around ending adultism, and it will be easier for us to do that when we are actively engaged in healing from our own experiences of internalized adultism. Deciding to heal for ourselves will support us to be those allies that young people want, the ones that we want to be. It will also support us to be more effective leaders and to strengthen our collective community. Wishing you a powerful and healing and beautiful school year ahead in solidarity. Thank you.